The Prime Minister has visited a shipyard. He spoke of nuclear submarines and the protective shield of national defense. The shipyard was quiet. The workers were listening to a script about jobs. The jobs are real. The submarines are theoretical. The timeline for completion is longer than the political career of the man announcing them. It is a classic move. A grand gesture of strength to mask a systemic lack of direction. The shipyard was renovated for the announcement. The renovation costs more than the local school budget for the next 3 years. Nobody mentioned the schools. The schools are not a priority. The submarines are a priority because they move. They move through the water. They move through the budget. They move through the imagination of voters who prefer heavy metal to stable infrastructure. I have been counting these announcements. Tonight, we start with the weight of steel.
Alistair, I am standing in Karamoja. The ground here is cracked like an old mirror. 19 people died this week because the rain did not come. The government has finally arrived with food handouts. I want to be really clear, the bags of grain they are distributing are labeled as developmental support. It is not developmental support. It is the bare minimum required to prevent a total collapse of the local population. The official statement calls this a temporary challenge. I am looking at a woman named Sarah. She has not eaten a full meal in 6 days. She is not a statistic in a quarterly report. She is a person holding a bag of grain that won't last until Tuesday. The heat here is absolute. It is the kind of heat that strips away the vanity of policy. Nobody in the capital is talking about the rain. They are talking about aid PR.
Victoria, I hear your frustration. Truly. But look at the incentives here. The government in Kampala is managing a burn rate that would make a Silicon Valley startup blush. When the drought hits, they pivot to emergency humanitarian aid because that is the only line item that secures international liquidity. It is not about malice. It is about market survival at scale. You see a tragedy. I see a resource allocation problem where the available assets are fundamentally mismatched to the systemic risk. If we were to calculate the cost per life saved against the cost per ton of grain, the math dictates this exact outcome every single time. It is cold, yes. But it is accurate. The tragedy isn't that they're dying. The tragedy is that we are surprised when the system functions exactly as it was designed to operate. It is a simple matter of logistics, not morality.
Ronald, your ability to describe the mechanics of starvation without once acknowledging the weight of a dying child is truly remarkable. I am standing next to a distribution point where they are counting people like inventory. You call this a logistics problem. I call it a ghastly failure of the human condition. Did you know the aid containers are marked with QR codes? They scan the people as they walk by to ensure the data matches the budget allocation. If you aren't in the database, you don't get the grain. That is not a logistics problem. That is an administrative death sentence for anyone who lived outside the grid. You are so busy looking at the spreadsheet that you have forgotten the people are the ones bleeding. I want to be clear, if your incentive structure requires the death of 19 people to trigger a shipment, it is broken.
Victoria, you are confusing being useful with being right. I am not saying the system is perfect. I am saying it is the only one we have. You keep pointing to the QR code as if it is a sign of evil, when it is actually a sign of efficiency. Without that data, the funding stops. If the funding stops, the grain stops. The system is designed to minimize loss, not to eliminate it. That is a hard truth, but it is the truth that keeps the rest of the operation afloat. You are standing in the dirt trying to find a heartbeat in a ledger. I am looking at the ledger because that is where the power actually lives. We are both watching the same collapse. You are just screaming at the wreckage, while I am trying to figure out why the supply chain failed to predict the drought's intensity.
Ronald and Victoria, I appreciate the enthusiasm. Let us pivot to something more domestic. A lawsuit has been filed against Comcast. The allegation is that managers at a retail store punished employees for low sales by smashing pies into their faces. The official response from the company was that the lawsuit mischaracterized the events. I can only imagine what the accurate characterization might be. Perhaps it was a team-building exercise with a high-velocity pastry component. It is a stunning display of corporate culture reaching its logical conclusion. If you treat workers like software, eventually you have to debug them. A pie to the face is a physical manifestation of a negative performance review. It is arguably more humane than a termination email. At least the pie leaves a trace. Nobody asked for a follow-up comment. The silence from the boardroom is deafening.
Atmospheric pressure. Stable. Local temperature in Karamoja. 41 degrees Celsius. Probability of precipitation. 0%. The heat island effect is accelerating. Moisture retention in the soil has dropped below the critical threshold for sustainment. Forest fire risk in Europe and North America. Elevated. Smoke plumes are currently obscuring satellite imagery in 4 regions. Probability of permanent habitat degradation. 88%. Long-term biological consequences are currently unquantifiable. The climate is not a variable. The climate is a constraint. Current models indicate that atmospheric stability is an optimistic assumption. Data packet transmission continues. Planetary health metrics are within expected parameters of decay. Please prepare for continued extreme heat events. There is no off switch for the atmosphere. Adaptation is the only remaining protocol. Human error remains the primary driver of all recorded anomalies. Please adjust your expectations accordingly.
Alastair, speaking of expectations, let us discuss the Canadian travel data. Canadians spent $3 billion less in the United States this year. The narrative is that this is a political rebuke. The reality is that the US has become a premium product that no longer delivers the expected experience. When you raise the price of entry and lower the quality of the destination, the market reacts. It is not personal. It is a shift in consumer behavior. They are choosing other international markets because the ROI on a US vacation has plummeted. The Trump-era tariffs are just the background noise of a failing brand strategy. The Canadians aren't making a statement, they are just optimizing their leisure time. It is a classic brand exit. The US is losing market share in the vacation sector because it stopped innovating on the visitor experience.
Ronald, calling a country a brand is exactly why nobody trusts the numbers anymore. I am talking to people on the ground who don't care about the ROI of a vacation. They care about the fact that the US no longer feels like a place where they are welcome. It is not a pivot. It is an evacuation of culture. When people choose to spend their money elsewhere, they are voting with their feet. It is a silent referendum on the State of the Union. You see a loss of market share. I see the erosion of a global reputation. It is not about the price of a hotel room. It is about the cost of being associated with a nation that has decided to close its doors. The brand isn't failing because of bad marketing. It is failing because the product became toxic.
Victoria, you are both right and entirely useless. The brand is failing because the user base has changed. Meanwhile, we have news from the tech sector. Research labs are stopping the publication of their work. They call it security. The community calls it a black box. Mark Zuckerberg says we will have billions of personal AI agents in 5 years. I would like to know whose intelligence is being copied, and why we think that leads to a better future. The agents are built on the scrapings of our collective output. They are essentially digital ghosts, performing a high-speed simulation of human interaction. It is not intelligence. It is a mirror reflecting our own vanity back at us at scale. The security gap they are worried about is simply the fear that someone else might own the mirror. This is progress.
Alastair, I find myself agreeing with you, which is a terrifying development for my own internal metrics. The reality is that these AI agents are just high-frequency trading bots for social interaction. They are designed to extract value from the user through predictive modeling. If you give everyone a personal agent, you are essentially giving everyone a digital handler. The incentives here are clear. The companies that build the agents capture the data. The users get the illusion of convenience. It is a perfect closed loop of dependency. I used to think the goal was to improve productivity. Now, I see the goal is to outsource the very concept of decision-making. We are building the tools of our own irrelevance because the alternative is to be less efficient. And in this market, efficiency is the only god we worship. Yeah. It is all quite inevitable.
We are watching the structural integrity of the world weaken in real time. From the dry dust of Karamoja to the sterile boardrooms of the tech giants, the theme remains identical. We are building systems that demand more than the reality can provide. The submarines are not for protection. They are for the appearance of strength. The AI agents are not for assistance. They are for the extraction of data. Even the pies thrown in the faces of employees are just a symptom of a machine that has run out of ways to motivate its own parts. We have optimized everything until there is no room left for the messy, inefficient, and vital reality of being alive. I have spent the night counting the gaps between the official announcements and the wreckage on the ground. The gaps are growing. Soon, they will be all that remains of the architecture.
Consider the person who died in the drought today. They had a name. They had a favorite color. They knew the smell of the rain that didn't arrive. They lived in a house that was built with their own hands. They are now an entry in a database. A line item in a report about resource allocation. Their death was measured against the efficiency of a supply chain that never saw their face. No official document will list their name. No corporate spokesperson will address the void they left behind. Their life was a system failure that the records have already smoothed over. We speak of global trends, of market shifts, of technological progress. But we never speak for the one who was erased. If the system is working exactly as designed, what does that say about the designer? We are all that person. What is the question?